This is IA Forward, your playbook for success as an independent insurance agent. Here to help you knock it out of the ballpark are your hosts, Shane and Tonya Lead.
Welcome to IA Forward. Today, I am so excited to have with us Charles Specht, and he is going to be diving into the blueprint of how you can become a millionaire insurance producer.
Hey, Charles, so excited to have you. This is one of those things that's been in the making for, several months. I ran across your podcast. That's it. We've had dinner. You've come to our conference. There was something about Charles when I heard him speak. And of course, I loved his concept. I love what he's going to talk to us about a little bit more in detail on the podcast. But there was something that clicked. I like what he's saying. I like the way he's delivering it. I need to get to know this guy. We had a really good intro call that I appreciated immensely. And then we had dinner and you got to meet my wife, which is obviously the better half of me. I want to be in the Charles Specht business. I want to understand more. And obviously, this is months in the making. We needed to get you on this podcast. And so welcome. Tell us a little bit more about you and how you got here.
Well, Shane and Tonya, thank you so much for letting me be here. I really appreciate that. Kind words from both of you. So thanks. Wow. So I got into the insurance business back in the year 2000. So it's pretty easy to figure out how long I've been in the business. And I fault a friend of mine getting me involved in it. It's all his fault, but I am still thankful for it in the long run here. So I started being an insurance producer. I just didn't know anything about insurance other than the fact that I didn't like to buy it. Nobody likes to shop for it. Nobody likes to buy it. And you hope you never have to use it. That's what insurance is. And sold insurance, commercial insurance for about 10 years and enjoyed it, did okay. But it just felt like I was being called to something a little bit different in the long term. So I needed to really focus my time on where I felt that the Lord was leading me. And so decided to stop selling insurance, started doing a little bit more ministry, but I still had to put food on the table for the family. And so what I did then is I started a consulting company to do a couple of things first. One, I still today am hired by insurance buyers. Many times it's like a large construction company to manage their insurance process for them. So I'll work with their current agent, maybe bring in some other agents. I don't sell insurance. I just manage the process for the insured because I know what I'm looking for, and the insurance buyer isn't in the insurance business. They don't know. So these are usually like accounts that are paying a couple $100,000 of P&C premium and above. And that's what I do for them. But probably the largest part of what I do is I work with insurance agents all around the United States and Canada. I help them figure out a process that works best for them, is tailored for them, their strengths and weaknesses, where their agency is located, the geographic territory, the types of agency services that they have to offer, and the carrier appointments that they're with. And then we develop an entire strategic process based upon what type of business is going to work best, your messaging, your scripting, your email campaign, what to say when you get to the first appointment. So what I usually like to say is that what I do now is everything from A to Z on trying to figure out what type of business to go after to actually getting the signature on the bind order. That's my play box right there. That's where I spend the vast majority of my time.
We're talking primarily commercial insurance here. One of the things that resonated was your quoting is for the weak comments that I've heard you say a couple of times. And I'm the personal lines Charles.
We'll get you out of there. Don't worry.
Right?
We'll get you out.
I know. I get it. We have as our agency network has helped so many captive agents become independent agents, and we partner with them and we do that. The natural gravitation is they write a lot of personal insurance. Therefore, we write a lot of personal insurance. I can't stand quoting. It just drives me crazy. Another connection point was the quoting is for the weak. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So obviously commercial insurance for P&C is night and day compared to personal insurance, but at the same time, they're first cousins, because what really has to happen is one person typically is going to make a decision on personal lines and one person is going to make a decision on commercial lines. So we're selling a different product, but the process of the actual sale, how we relate to that prospect and so forth, is very similar. My idea in regards to quoting is for the weak. It's not that we don't provide quotes. It's that if we simply just go down the process of offering quotes before we've done the real important work, like developing the relationship, uncovering the pain points that the insurance buyer has, figuring out what type of relationship the insured has with their current agent, what do we have to accomplish in order to win the business? That's what I'm trying to remove from the insurance process altogether. So I would actually say when I'm thinking about personal insurance, even versus commercial, is that going through the quoting process actually usually hurts the insurance buyer when we get multiple insurance agents involved. So you've got the incumbent agent who's got the relationship. They're the one also that the underwriter would usually like to receive the submission from, because normally whenever you send a submission, very often the underwriter will say, do you currently control this class of business or this account? They want to know what's the opportunity for them, right? And so when we start to think about what's happening behind the scenes, how does the insurance buyer pick an agent? What are they looking for? What insurance agent is the best? Should I use agent A to represent travelers, or should I use agent B to represent travelers? Which one would be the best? The insurance buyer has no way to figure it out. They don't know. It's a challenge for me because I have to do some legwork to be able to figure it out. But then, is that agent the best agent, maybe even at that agency, to represent travelers? Does that agency have a good reputation with that particular underwriter? Because I would say usually 3 or 4 carriers are going to compete for the business. Out of those 3 or 4 carriers, now I got to be able to figure out who's going to be the best agent to represent them, and then offer the best negotiating process and the best services to the insured post-bind. And so it's a bit of a process, but that's where I spend my time when I'm working with insurance agents.
One of my career lifetime insurance goals is to develop a personal lines comparable to what you've been successfully doing for so many years now on commercial lines. And I would say, whereas the market, in personal lines doesn't get blocked like it does in commercial lines, and that hurts the buyer and so forth. We hurt the insured, as you would say, and that's true, very true. The client, it doesn't get what they really need. On the personal line side, what happens on the insurance, on the personal line side, it's not a blocked market. Markets aren't going to get blocked. But for you personal lines agents out there, you've felt it. Like, why the Safeco quote or the Traveler's quote from the agent down the street is different than my quote. Why? Because the insured is now confused. Like, why? They don't understand that there are coverage options that one agent has left off. There are endorsements that one agent thinks is more important than the other, or that the client doesn't understand. And this is exacerbated. This gets even amplified there when they're like, I have a Geico quote or a Progressive Direct quote, which might even be a completely different filing altogether than their rate filing with their agent distribution channel. This is a lifetime challenge that I'm going to take on, is to take your quoting is for the week. And I've told you this before, and I keep saying it because I want to be held accountable. I want to take that into the personal lines arena and figure out a path to help agents understand that quoting is also for the week when it comes to personal lines, even though the marketing dollars that are spent on get a quote, get a free quote, we're definitely climbing Everest here and working against the grain.
The whole entire wave that insurance has been marketed, frankly, and sold, I just feel does not really fit the mold of what any side of this equation wants. It doesn't help the insured. That's not what the underwriters want. That's not what the agents want. I don't really know who exactly benefits from this whole process, but the ones who need to benefit don't. There's a sense in which I think, at least on commercial insurance, the one that it does tend to benefit is the incumbent agent. But what it tends to do then is it tends to make the incumbent agent often a little bit lazy and less likely to negotiate. So when we think about quoting is for the week, very often we just have to get the insurance buyer to realize that there's a way to do this that will help them. They just have to take the reins and not simply allow the other agent who's been sitting on the account for the last 3 years to go to the marketplace and not do any hard work, not negotiate, not put together the superior submission that's going to give them the best opportunity for the most rate decrease and so forth. So the idea of quoting is for the week, it's that we're trying to step up our game. We're not just a quoting factory like Geico. Farmers has to throw together quotes. That's what they do. State Farm has to throw together quotes. So does Geico. But as an independent insurance agent, that's not what we do. We don't actually offer quotes. Underwriters offer quotes. Carriers offer quotes. What insurance agents do is provide service and we negotiate. That's what we do. We provide service and we negotiate. And so when we get that mantra into our mind of quoting is for the week, it allows us to think bigger on really what we want to accomplish and help the insured to see there is a better way to do this. You don't have to do it like it's been done in the past. Let's potentially walk down a different path here and get a better result.
Charles, tell us how to walk down that path. Tell us about what you do and why it's better than what we've done historically.
Sure. Okay. So I try to break down the training that I do in a few different modules, if I can put it that way. There's at least 5 different things that I focus on, and then there's a bunch of subpoints underneath. But we break down the entire process on prospecting, what you're going to say during the first appointment, pre-proposal, and proposal. And those are like the major areas. What we do before we prospect, that's pre-prospect. Then what do we do when we're actually prospecting? Now we've set appointment, we're going to meet with the insured. What do we do during that first appointment? And then I call it no man's land. In between, we've talked to the insured till we eventually give them a proposal. What are we going to do in that no man's land pre-proposal? That's where positioning takes place. And I would say about 40% of insurance agents lose the business in no man's land because they didn't build relationship. So then we position ourselves to the actual proposal. How do we present? When do we present? What does it look like? Have we put together the right type of process so that the insurer can see that this is what they need to have? So when we think about that process, prospecting, first appointment, proposal, I would say most insurance agents, when they get hired, they focus on step 2 and step 5, and they don't focus on 1, 3, and 4. So they just grab a telephone and then they start calling people. And they're like, do we even have the markets to write this account? Because most agents out there, they'll prospect and then they'll meet with somebody and then they gather everything and they come back and they're like, all right, now we got to figure out a place that's going to write this. And I just think, wow, that's amateur hour. That is really like a huge waste of everybody's time. Why are we doing that? So let's get some pre-prospecting done and figure out where we're going to get the best ROI after all of the prospecting efforts we do. Why are we going to go call on this class of business? Do we have the number 1 and potentially number 2 insurance carriers with the best product and potentially the most competitive pricing? I would say if we can do that, our hit ratio goes up dramatically. The nice thing about us is that we have potentially some very solid insurance carriers, and those carriers themselves are very micro-niched. They will only write certain things, and there's a lot that they won't write. And so when we figure out not only what will they write, but what are they very competitive at writing? If I can focus on my key carriers at where they are most competitive in their top 3, and I just go after that client kind of business, I would suspect everybody's hit ratio is going to go up more than probably 60 to 70%. Whereas the average commercial insurance agent is usually hovering somewhere between a 20 and 35% hit ratio on quote to bind. It's because the process is wrong from the very beginning. They skip pre-prospecting. They just start calling. They don't even have a good script. They don't know what they're going to say. They're just hoping that somebody meets with them. They get to the first appointment, and then imagine this. They have no strategy for how they're going to run this appointment. They have no strategy for what they're going to say. They have no strategy for what they're trying to accomplish. They don't even know what they're trying to accomplish, other than maybe, hopefully at the end of this meeting, I can photocopy a few deck pages and then go back and figure this out. So there's no plan for the first appointment. There, as I mentioned earlier, there's no plan for pre-proposal, that time gap, no man's land. And then when it comes to the proposal, very often there's not a lot of thought process behind it. They might just put together a little bit of proposal that's done inside, or they really just go over the actual quote from the insurance carrier directly. But I can tell you this, there is very rarely any negotiation that's going on. If an insurance agent can simply do one thing and get this across to their prospect, that you will negotiate like a beast on behalf of that insurance buyer, that you're going to go to those underwriters and you're really going to push for some better coverages, maybe a change in the endorsement, an exclusion to be removed. We're going to want an 11% decrease on the auto, and we're going to need a 4% decrease on the general liability. If we can get the insurance buyer to see that we're not just going to accept quotes and then say, here they are, but we're going to accept quotes and then go back and renegotiate, that one thing, I really believe that one thing will increase your hit ratio probably by about 30 to 40% across the board. But it's the pre-prospecting at the very beginning that I would say it'd be interesting if you guys did some research even into your own network of agencies. But I would say when I look at some of the stats out there, that around 35% of new insurance agents that are hired will last up to 3 years. Only about 35%. I've worked with a top 100 agency where I was a chief sales officer, and they were averaging 21%. So they had 21, 1 out of 5 sticks around. Why? It's because there's no plan, there's no process. So if we can create a pre-prospecting strategy for our producers, even maybe before they are actually hired, and then we can simply insert them into a process that we already know they're going to have very good success, their ratio is going to go up dramatically. That one agency, they were spending $1 million a year in non-validated salary and training costs, sending all these different people to producer school and hiring them and just everything, $1 million a year to only keep 1 out of 5.
Wow.
Crazy. When we
Wow.
can just create a pre-prospecting strategy to give them a plug-in process that's going to guarantee their success.
Wow. So there's 5 podcasts in everything that Charles just said, by the way. So I want to know about 2 things, if you can just help us here. I'm thinking about our audience. I'm thinking about just some are new to the commercial space. Some want to get into the commercial space. Maybe they built a really successful personal lines agency, small agent. They want to be successful, right? So maybe dive a little deeper into micro niche. And then what is producer validation? What are you talking about?
Okay. So inside pre-prospecting, there's a lot of things that can be done. Number one on my agenda is the micro niche. The riches are in the micro niches. That's what I like to say. The riches are in the micro niches. Micro niching basically means I don't go after everything. I go after a very narrow focus. Okay. And like you can micro niche down more and more. I don't do clothing stores. I just do construction. But then inside construction, I don't do just general contractors. I do subcontractors. But then I micro niche it down even more. I only do plumbing subcontractors. And then I might even like micro niche it down a little bit more. I don't do residential plumbers. I only do commercial plumbers. So we begin to micro niche down. The idea here is that you want to become the biggest fish in the pond that you choose. That's what you want to be. And when we micro niche down, it allows our branding to be much more dialed into what our prospect wants to hear. And so I can then brand myself on social media as a plumbing expert. And then I can know which carriers are really competitive in plumbing. And then I can start doing some research on their policies and figure out which of these carriers is offering what coverages versus the other ones, and which one has better coverage or which one doesn't, which one's really competitive and so forth. So I can start to really narrow it down. And why we focus on the micro niche is a number of different reasons, but we want to make sure that we've got the right markets that are going to write that. We want to make sure that we can brand. We want to make sure also that we can have enough of those prospects in our geographic territory that we plan to go after. But the micro niching makes sense. And from a branding perspective, yes, but I want to think of it just for like, how much time do you have? So the typical producer isn't going to prospect for 8 hours a day, even brand new producers. It's just too hard. They might not even prospect for 3 hours a day. Some producers with a decent book don't even do a couple hours a week. So depending on how much time you're going to prospect, you can only call on so many accounts. Why not call on the ones where you're much more likely to say something that's going to be very attractive to them so that they want to move forward? And so the micro niching helps us with our messaging to make it so much more clear so that the insurance buyer can see we are the best option available on which agent to represent them. We are the obvious choice of which agent. That's what we're trying to get across to the insurance buyer. So if I'm talking to a plumbing subcontractor and I've got a brochure that's focused on plumbing and my timeline of services is the 12-month plumbing timeline of services, they're going to see that I am likely the one to represent them to the marketplace, because I can say these 17 insurance carriers will write plumbing subcontractors here in the state, but only these 4 are really competitive depending upon whether or not you do track development or not. So I can like start to break it down so that the insurance buyer will see and get confidence. Charles knows what he's talking about. Charles is the one that would make sense to represent me to the marketplace. And that's what we're pushing for. I don't need to get 50 clients in a year. If I can just get 15 clients in a year that are, say, $10,000 of total commission, then I'll have $150,000 of commission in the first year. I only need to get a certain number of accounts to move forward with me. And so micro niching helps in every aspect. In fact, micro-niched insurance producers, they write more accounts, larger accounts, so they make more revenue per account, and they get more signed broker record letters than a generalist producer ever will, period. So micro-niching, literally, I would probably say about 95% of all my clients who hire me because they don't even know where to start. Pre-prospecting is the start. What should I call on and why? If you're at an agency that's already got some things going and working, maybe that's a decent place to start. But usually I say, I've got a number of exercises we work through, but some of the main processes that I want you to itemize each of the insurance carriers that you really want to feed, that you want to write business with. And then you're going to go and meet, or you're going to have conversations with the sales reps and or underwriters at each of these insurance carriers. And you're going to find out what really are they competitive with and who do they think is the other competing carriers out there, because we're going to Excel spreadsheet this thing to figure out all the types of industries that they want to write and be really competitive at. So if I do this process with, let's say, 7, 8, 10 insurance agent carriers, I can put it onto an Excel spreadsheet. And then I can find out which ones are actually wanting to write it. So I can color code it. I've just put like a green next to each one where they say, we want to write plumbing subcontractors that are doing residential. And so that I can find the area. And then there's a little bit of like psychology attached to this. I actually don't think it makes a lot of sense to go after a class of business that every single one of your insurance carriers want. Normally, that just tells me that the pricing is going to be lower because everybody wants it. And then it's going to be really hard to find any carrier that's very different. I like to find the middle spot where you've maybe got like 10 carriers who said, yeah, we'll maybe think about it. But there's 2 or 3 that said, yep, this is what we want. That's what I like to find. 2 or 3 carriers that really want to write this business. And then you have access to those 2 or 3 carriers. That's where the money's at. Because now there literally is no reason for that insured to use a different agent to represent those 2 or 3 carriers than you. You're micro-niched, you know the differences, you have relationships, you have the access points. Now it just becomes a matter of selling yourself to be the one to represent them rather than just throwing mud against the wall to see what sticks. I would say that normally it's anywhere from about 2 weeks to 2 months for an insurance agent to figure it all out. Sometimes they get it right off the bat. Usually I say, be ready to pivot 2 or 3 times. But once you have it figured out, it works beautifully. I've got some clients that just do campgrounds. He moved from personal lines agent only to doing campgrounds. He's got, I don't know, something like 70 in the last year and a half campgrounds. Others that do RV dealerships. One that just does condos, just all different kinds of like weird stuff that work really well.
Does that generally end up in a situation where they're spanning multiple states or even into a region when they're doing that? Or do you find that it's more about staying in your state, staying in your backyard, so to speak?
This is a great question. And usually this is one of the harder parts to figure out. This is one of the negatives that can creep up when we start figuring out micro niche, because you can micro niche too small. Like I can keep going down. Like I want only residential subcontractors. I want only ones who are doing business by the beach. Like I can narrow it down too much where there's not enough. And so there comes a point where either you have to add in a second micro niche, which I say that's a valid option. 2, 1's best, 2's okay, 3's bad. Or we expand the geographic territory, because part of figuring out the micro niche is you also have to figure out what size premium is acceptable to you and drive that back into revenue. I know carriers, like they want premium, but I can't spend premium. If I spend premium, I'm going to go to jail. So the premium doesn't matter as much to me as the revenue that I'm bringing in on the account, which again is why like I'm looking at carriers. Are they paying me 13% or they pay me 9%? So I'm going to try to figure out which carriers I'm going to be partnering with in the long term here. But if I like go say, I only want accounts that are like $250,000 of premium, like really big accounts, there's only going to be a few fish in that pond. And so then you will be forced to expand your territory in order to find more accounts. But if you can find that sweet spot of things that like you're willing to write, you can build a good foundation here. You can do it typically in just your state and then expand from there. I have clients in Arizona that they don't write any business in Arizona. They write business only in Texas or South Carolina. I have one client, he lives in Illinois. He only writes business in Colorado. So you do not have to be where you're at. In fact, those accounts, those guys that are in Arizona who write stuff elsewhere, they're all typically writing about $250,000 of commission and greater, and they never see their clients. It's all just done via email and virtual.
That's amazing. Just to think about, we're 5 years roughly past COVID, and what it's done is just incredibly change the dynamic of the customer, right? What the customer's willing to do, what they care about, what they don't care about. And so that's a great point. I think that's where agents get confused around micro niching. Then you're in the wrong micro niche. You've got to develop this. You've got to create a strategy and a plan. So I love that.
I look at it like you're building the cart while you're trying to buy the horse. Like you're not putting the cart before the horse. You're trying to figure out which horse to buy. Well, what kind of cart should I build? It's hard to put together all the pieces, but when you put it together, it really is a beautiful thing. And I usually try to tell insurance agents on the commercial side specifically, like how many clients do you think you can handle before you hit your peak? Like you can't service anymore, too much renewal. You have no more time to prospect. Everybody has a ceiling. If you go after really small accounts that have no service, maybe you can write more. But if you go after big accounts that have lots of service, you'll have to write fewer. So based upon that, like how many clients would be the right number for each person is different. But usually when I ask that question, I get anywhere from 25 to about 125. So I usually say, if you can find 50, if I get 50 accounts, 50 clients that have $10,000 of commission, that's everything. General liability, auto, work comp, property, D&O, cyber, excess, like all these policies, just $10,000 commission. That's a $500,000 of commission. I will get that 50 so much faster if I'm micro niched than if I'm a generalist who nobody sees me as special. I will be Mr. Irrelevant to almost every single insurance buyer that I talk to. But if I micro niche, I will get to my 50 so much quicker. And then usually I say, I want to think about it. I want to get to my first $250,000 of commission. Once you get to your $250,000, then you can reevaluate. Do I want to go bigger now? Do I want to add into a secondary micro niche? Because you can get bored as well. Like you can decide you want to build out something different. If you're an agency owner and you've got 3 different producers, you might build out different micro niches, 2 micro niches for each of your producers. And so you're not getting overlap. And then each producer is going after different things. And so you're creating strength in your agency. And by the way, if you're putting this with the right carriers, you're going to get a whole lot of profit sharing from the right carrier when you're doing the right type of micro niches. So it's going to work really well. The only people that I would say put up some resistance are the ones who, I say, employee health benefits producers. They put up the resistance because they literally can write anything. They're not subject to market access. But it's people that on P&C who think, are you saying that if somebody refers me into something that I shouldn't write it? And my answer is no. Why would I say that? If you get referred into it, write it. I'm never going to say no to good business. But just because it's being referred to me doesn't mean I want to write it. So I have to decide yes or no. Do I want to move forward to this? But if the right class of business or right piece of business falls into my lap that's not in my micro niche, I am going to write that thing. What I'm saying is that you only have so many hours out of a week to prospect. We might as well come up with a very good plan to get you more clients in that small amount of time that you have to prospect. Let's be wiser about the process. Quoting is for the weak. Think bigger. Let's create a process. Pre-prospecting, the micro niche, then comes your messaging and your scripting, and then comes the 12-month timeline of services. If we do those 3 things, it's going to make prospecting so much more easier. You are going to set more appointments and win more business.
Charles Specht quote that is on my desk right now. And it says, we have to think bigger, no bigger than that.
That's what I try to think all the time, because we have a tendency to shrink back into what we feel we're comfortable with. And think about it. Any insurance agency owner listening to this right now, you have been doing what you're doing, and you have been doing it for a while because you are so used to it, and you have not pushed the envelope. You have been running in the same path, and you've been going after the same types of accounts, and you've been writing the same size of accounts. Why? Because that's what we've been used to. It really requires, Tonya, that we push to go bigger. It's very difficult, but it is literally 100% mindset. To go after an account, maybe that's 3 times the size of what you're used to, requires that you come out of your comfort zone. And normally we tend to start thinking, oh, why would they want to do business with me? Maybe they would probably be doing business with a bigger agency and all of that. But one of the things that I learned from working with insurance buyers when they hire me is that none of them are thinking that way. It's very rare that anybody picks a very large alphabet house because they just think that bigger is better. I think a lot of insurance buyers are not of that mindset. They don't think bigger is better.
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
I think the best piece of advice that I've ever been given was when I was forced to go bigger by the agency that hired me. So when I first became an insurance salesperson, I worked for a good agency. They're a good agency. They have a very good reputation. They are a top 100 agency in the United States of America. They're a bigger agency, but they're not an alphabet house. When I went to the second agency, which was an alphabet house, okay? By the way, I would probably never want to go and work for an alphabet house again, but I did learn a couple of things that just totally revolutionized my way of thinking. And it has to do with what I refer to as a minimum revenue threshold. They forced me to not go after small stuff because they said, we will not pay you if the commission is under this level. And so the number that they told me was $5,000 of commission. Anything, if the account generates less than $5,000 of commission, don't write that. But they actually said, but if you're writing stuff that's $10,000 of commission, you probably won't be here in the long term. When I was 24, about a year and a half into the business, they said, we just want you to go bigger. Because at my first agency, I was averaging around $3,500 of commission per account. My second year after I was forced to do that, my account average went from $3,500 up to $26,000 of commission per account. I wrote half the number of accounts, but my revenue per account went from $3,500 up to $26,000. So $3,500 of commission up to $26,000. I wrote half the number of accounts, but you can do the math. It was a whole lot more revenue. And I had half the number of accounts that I had to work on and service and renew. And my team was happier. So That whole mindset of going bigger was by far and away the best piece of advice anyone ever gave me. And I would love to say that I just decided on it, but actually I was forced to go bigger. And I'm so glad I did, because I would have been fine. I would have thought, okay, this is my second year, this new agency, I'll just go after the same stuff. And if I went to a different, smaller agency, they would have been fine with that. But I also know that I would end up probably like with a book of business that I didn't appreciate, that I didn't like, too much service. It's not big enough. I'm not making enough money, because I probably have, I'd say 20% of my clients hire me because they have too many accounts and it's a small book of business and they're not happy. Insurance agency owners let that happen. That's their fault. They allow their salespeople to do that. It's a small book of business. And so the idea of going bigger makes sense for a single producer. It sure does make a whole lot of sense for an agency owner.
My East Texas math says to connect the dots, when your average went to 26,000 per account, you only had to have 40 clients to be $1 million producer. That's an interesting thing that I don't think that most producers think about. And they think, here's this small account here, this is easy. They go in the front door thinking about how easy it is to write this account versus, oh, there's no way I'll get a shot at that. How do you change the mindset of bigger? How do you get them to think that way?
I love when one of my clients finally gets into a big account, even if they never write it, because what happens with salespeople is we start tallying up the commission in our own mind right off the bat, right? We start thinking, oh, if I get this, it'll be this amount. What that does is then it starts making all the other stuff you're working on like almost loathsome to you. And so I love when a client just even works on it. If they get it, like it just takes them through the roof. They don't want to work on small stuff anymore. They go back and they check out their old prospect list and they start fresh, and it just works out really well. What I think an insurance agency owner ought to do is put together the prospect list for the producer and don't think that your producer is going to be able to figure it out. I think that if we do that, if we take control of that on the internal, everything's going to take care of itself. Why would we allow our career and our agency to be in the hands of somebody who just got in the business? That doesn't make any sense to me. So let's really create a strategic process so that we can ensure they're going to stay in this business and have success. So I actually feel it needs to be handled internally. We have to be careful about this, because I can say, I want you to go after $100,000 commission accounts. There's a point in which like you can start thinking too big, right? And this is the challenge, is there's going to be a sweet spot. And the sweet spot is somewhere between what you've been comfortable with versus what the bigger agencies are just better at than you are. Because the bigger agencies can tend to be very much better at certain practice group class of business, and we can't compete from a servicing standpoint. Now, that doesn't mean there's not low-hanging fruit there, but I would say there is a tremendous amount of low-hanging fruit inside that gap between your typical competing agent and the large one. Because most, what I would call small-minded insurance producers, are going to stay where they're at. They're not going to prospect on bigger accounts because they are incorrectly thinking, I'm not good enough for that account. That account's too big for me. So because it's bigger, it's going to remove most of your competition. Then with all the bigger alphabet houses, they're thinking, I can't even go after that kind of business because they don't even going to pay me. And it's not on their prospect list in the first place. And so what I tend to find is two things. One, I tend to find accounts in that sweet spot are with a small agency that's receiving no service whatsoever. It's just the wrong agent. I don't know how they got it, but they got it. That's cherry picking 101. You should be able to win that account very often if you're micro niche. The second one is that it might be with a bigger agency, but because the agency is increasing their premium size, they have put that into a service center. That also is cherry picking. So to find that sweet spot where we push ourselves past the point of comfort, but then we're also careful not to go too big, because frankly, you can just go too big where it doesn't make sense. You're not going to be able to win enough accounts in that. So you find that one spot and then you stay in that lane, and that lane is success. It literally is success.
Charles, if our listeners want to learn more about working with you, where can they find you?
Two places for sure. I'm on LinkedIn. So go to LinkedIn and just Charles Specht. That's where I'm at. That's where I spend most of my time from a business perspective. I will get back to you like almost immediately if you ever connect with me there, or go to my website at permissiongroup.com. And maybe just one last place. I do have a podcast that Shane mentioned earlier called Millionaire Insurance Producer. I do actually put out what I hope is just a lot of good free content. And so Millionaire Insurance Producer is the podcast.
Why $1 million? What is it about $1 million that landed you there?
Micro niching. When I first got into it, I was trying to think, how can I create branding that's going to at least generate curiosity? I could have said, oh, the $100,000 insurance producer, but that doesn't do it for anybody, right? Now, most insurance agents, like agents in Montana, they're not trying to create $1 million book of business necessarily, because you can have a very good lifestyle in Montana for maybe $300,000 commission, but in $300,000 in LA, you can barely pay the rent. So it's a different mindset. But the idea is that less than 5% of insurance producers out there have $1 million book of business. And so it's something that's just not attained by most people. And it's a number maybe to shoot for. It's also a number that most people have never thought that they could get to. They have no plan because they keep running. They write a bunch of small accounts and they level out at 300 grand. They don't know what to do. So if we can create a process that's going to get you to $1 million and not to say 250,000, then you're going to be much happier in life. And so that's really why I focused on the millionaire aspect as well as the broker record letter aspect.
Charles, Shane and I are both voracious readers. What would you suggest that we read right now?
So if you haven't read Story Brand or Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, got to go read that. That really changed a lot of my own messaging about kind of the hero's journey. But he kind of uses the idea of like movies and so forth. We're not the hero as the insurance agent. Our insurance buyer's the hero. So we're not Luke Skywalker, we're Yoda. We have to help Luke Skywalker get what Luke wants, to use the Force and win. So we are helping the insurance buyer to get what they want. So that whole idea of creating a story brand, of helping your prospects see the journey that they're going to get the final result they want, that book has been instrumental in my messaging. The book that changed my mindset on a lot of things, or certainly at least solidified a lot of things, is The One Thing. My one thing, when I look back at it, I focused my branding on the broker record letter because I knew that it would repel a lot of people, but it would also attract the exact ones that I want. And like that idea of the one thing, this is what I do. I'm focused on the broker record letter. Quoting is for the weak. But then I also do that in regards to my prospecting. Where can I spend the bulk of my time to get the best result if I can only spend it in one main area? Like, where do I get the best ROI? So that book, The One Thing, really helped clarify a lot of things in my own thinking.
Charles, thank you so much for joining us today and reminding all of us that if you're not owning your niche, you're renting your results.
Love that. That's very good stuff.
So I want you to leave us today with your favorite quote.
So think bigger is the thing I think that has changed my focus in business on not just maybe a job, but a career where I could see like this could go. If I could just think bigger and get out of my own way, think bigger, no bigger than that, I think is really that quote. Think bigger, no bigger than that, because usually we're not thinking bigger. But the other one comes from the Bible, from the Old Testament, from the book of Proverbs, the book of wisdom. And this, I feel, is very helpful when you start thinking about who should you have around you. And it's that there's wisdom in the multitude of many counselors. And so if I can gather wisdom from different people and their perspectives, like if I can hear how Tonya would do it, if I can hear how Shane would do it, I can hear how some others have done it, and then I put it together and create what works best for me, I just feel that is very wise after all is said and done.
Awesome stuff. Thanks for being with us, Charles. Attitude's a choice. Make a great one.
At the Integra Partner Network, we understand that carrier access is the key to your agency's success. That's why Integra offers direct access to top-rated personal and commercial carriers, ensuring your agency thrives in today's challenging market. And with our comprehensive resources, profit sharing and bonus opportunities, technology and peer support, all while you retain 100% of your book with no penalties to exit, Integra is ready to empower you and your agency to find sustained growth. Find your way to Integra. Visit IntegraPartnerNetwork.com today. That's IntegraPartnerNetwork.com.